Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to Real Wealth Network's weekly webinar. My name is Ben Smith. I'm the Director of Investor Relations, also kind of double as an investment counselor. So glad you could join us. We do this every Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Pacific. And here we are once again looking at a wonderful panoramic view of the city of Tampa. So today is October 11th, 2018. And as is pretty obvious, we're going to be talking about Tampa, Florida today. I've got a great affiliate in Tampa, Florida. Had him on many times. It's been a while, though, so glad to have you back. If you could just go ahead and advance for me while we gaze at the Tampa Convention Center, and I'll read this friendly disclaimer. Strategies mentioned may not be appropriate for everyone. Other options not mentioned may be more suitable for your specific circumstances. Consult your personal accountant, tax advisor, and/or attorney to discuss your specific situation. Past performance not a guarantee of future results. Real estate purchases are subject to investment risks, including the possible loss of amounts invested. While every effort is made to maintain accurate and current information, the possibility of errors and/or updates always exists. In other words, do your due diligence, please, and trust us, but verify what we say. Always a good idea to verify what we say. If you could advance for me, that would be wonderful. All right, so coming up, and it's just like literally right around the corner. It's not this weekend, but the weekend after that, we're going to have Tampa at our event on the West Coast. We're also going to have Jacksonville, and there's probably going to be a surprise or two thrown in there, but those are the two biggies. Saturday the 20th in San Mateo, just south of, just like 10 minutes away from the San Francisco airport, from noon to 3 p.m. The very next day, we're in Los Angeles, 2 to 5. And on Monday, we're in San Diego, 6 to 9 p.m. So please register if you think you might be able to go to that. If you can't go because you're, a continent away or even a couple hundred miles, rest assured it's all right. We'll miss you, but we archive these webinars, and essentially you're just seeing a live version of the webinar. You get to soak up the interaction, the advantages. You're with a lot of other members of Real Wealth Network, and you can talk to them. But the information is the same. So anyway, register please at realwealthNetwork.com/live-events. And we really appreciate it if you register so that we don't have to do the mad last-minute scramble, rushing shares in the room and bumping into people and wreaking havoc. So register, please. All right, about me, I don't like seeing myself up there, but whatever, it is what it is. So like I said earlier, I'm an IC, investment counselor, and I also oversee the team of ICs and wear a bunch of hats. We all wear a bunch of hats within Real Wealth Network. Been doing real estate for, I think, probably about 27 years at this point. Full-time now, but for a while there, it was part-time. I did fix and flips for years in Arizona, and rented houses and bought houses to rent out and fixed them up in California, and then kind of shifted the focus east. Now have 12 properties. They're all based in either Florida or Ohio or Pennsylvania. I've got a house in Pittsburgh and a house in Cleveland and 3 in Cincinnati and a couple in Jacksonville and a couple in Tampa. So I love the business. The business is great. It's a fun thing to ride through the ups and the downs. And buy and hold is definitely a lot less stressful than fix and flip. But anyway, enough about me. Next. All righty. So what we're going to do is talk to our Tampa, Florida affiliate, and just by way of a little background, we found you guys, or you found us, I think about like 2.5 years ago or something.
Yeah, I think it was in the Miami IMN event about 2.5 years ago. Yeah.
Yep, that seems about right. And we've had a tremendous amount of success. A lot of our members have bought properties with you guys over the last couple of years. It's one of my favorite markets. It helps that I live now about an hour to 2 hours away, depending on where it is. But without further ado, I will turn it over to you, and you can talk about all that you do there.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you very much. It's good to be back at the webinars. So yeah, I'm the Tampa affiliate. Like Ben said, we've been working with Real Wealth Network for several years now. We've helped a lot of investors buy homes in property, not just in the last 2.5 years, but really in the last 10 years, which is how long I've been involved in US real estate, and overseas real estate another 4 or 5 years before that, which always gives a good perspective as well. So, our business is reasonably straightforward, where we buy a lot of houses in very specific neighborhoods in Tampa, Florida. We do about 100 to 120 properties a year, certainly over 200 in the last 2 years. And we try and break it down. I mean, 2 or 3 properties a week is what we try and purchase. We bought one this morning at a foreclosure auction. We got another one yesterday morning, the same thing. And my job is, I consider myself really fortunate to be able to work full time in real estate investing. I know most of the people listening in here are very passionate about real estate investing, but you might have another job that you do from 9 to 5 in real estate afterwards. So I'm, blessed to be able to do it all the time and kind of control my own destiny through real estate, which I love. So, I spend my days mostly sourcing properties, speaking with investors, networking with other people here in Tampa. I like going to RIA meetings. I'll be going to one after this webinar to learn more about tax deed sales, for example. So I love what I do. We're very focused on working with investors. I'm not really too involved at all in selling homes to owner occupiers or vacationers or retirees or anything like that. Really since I started out, I've always been focused on finding great rental properties for myself, my colleagues, and investors all over the world. So, that's kind of what I do in a nutshell. And why Florida? I mean, there's lots of reasons why people like Florida, why people come to Florida, but the reason, we invest here is really because of the fundamentals. It's not, it's not the sunshine, although that's a nice bonus. But it's the fundamentals. I mean, Florida has one of the fastest growing populations in the country, and it has had for quite a long time now. And really, you can kind of sometimes get too focused on looking at property addresses, square footages, rental rates, price ratios, and all that stuff is super important. But it's also important to take a step back and look at the macros of the market. And if you're in a market that has a fast growing population, it really does make a lot of things easier. I mean, it obviously lowers your vacancy rates if you have a fast growing population. It increases demand for properties. It increases the prices of properties. So a lot of the things that'll make you money in real estate are a lot easier to achieve when you have a fast growing population. And Florida has that in spades. It also it's a great market for job creation. It's one of the lowest unemployment rates of any major state. I think it's actually at 3.6% now. And I didn't think it would physically be able to go under 4%, but it is. It's an extremely strong market and an extremely buoyant and diverse economy as well. It's the only state east of the Mississippi that has no state income tax, which is quite a nice bonus to have. It also has very low property taxes. I think it's about number 11 out of 50 states in property taxes, which is very good. It's also a very landlord friendly state. Obviously, any listeners in California or New York, it's the opposite in those places. One in the few times where we have had to kind of exercise our landlord rights or our landlord muscles, it's been very, very straightforward and easy to do so. And why Tampa? I mean, Florida's obviously got a lot of major well-known markets. You've Miami, you've Orlando, you've Jacksonville. I mean, we're in Tampa for a few different reasons. First of all, the economy is extremely strong here. The population growth is even stronger than the Florida average, 28% growth between 2000 and 2017. I mean, it's grown about 15% since I've been coming here during the last 10 years. It's a very affordable market, which is crucial to that population growth and to that job growth, because when you have affordable properties, people want to move here, people want to work here, so it all works together. It's not a small area at all. It's far bigger in terms of its economy size than Jacksonville and Orlando. It's the top 20 MSA in the country. Very diverse range of businesses, including healthcare, education. I'll go through some graphs in a minute just to show you how diverse it is. Infrastructure is really, really good here. You're not getting crazy traffic jams that you get in the Bay Area or in Los Angeles in Tampa at all. Couldn't be more different. They've spent a lot of money on the major highways here. The airport's just finished a multi-billion-dollar expansion, which makes it a joy to travel through. I'll obviously be doing that next weekend when I'm traveling out to the shows.
Me too.
Yeah, you too. Water. Tampa's got some extremely important ports, just both for commercial reasons and military reasons, which have had multi-billion-dollar extensions as well, and they're spending hundreds of millions of dollars continuing to do that. And while Florida you might think, yeah, Florida's for retirees. I mean, yeah, fair enough. It is a great place for retirees, but it's actually one of the top relocation destinations for professionals, and that's effectively young people coming here to set up their lives, to set up a family. There's huge amounts of people moving, especially from the more expensive cities on the northeast coast to Florida. So it's a very, very popular relocation destination, which again helps drive your rental income, helps drive property prices. And here's, picture paints 1,000 words. Look how the population has been increasing just since 2010 alone. I mean, more than twice the US average, comfortably almost 3 times the US average. So, more than 3 million people in the Tampa Bay area. And, like I say, a great place to do business. So drilling down a little bit further, it's a $130 billion economy. That's actually probably a little bit bigger now. That's about a year old. MacDill Air Force Base is here, so is US Central Command, so an important kind of military presence, but certainly not in any way dominating the market or dominating the economy or the real estate market. The University of South Florida, probably a more important presence in Tampa. Almost 50,000 students there, 9,000 faculty, very important research center as well. A lot of companies get created from people that have been to and are researching in the University of South Florida. And Tampa really seems to be focusing on the industries and the job growths which are going to make any city thrive in the 21st century. They're focusing on those STEM industries: science, technology, engineering, mathematics, the financial services, the healthcare. These are the industries that are going to create the wealth and going to create the jobs in the next 10, 15, 20 years. And Tampa is certainly one of the leaders in that regard throughout the USA. And this graph, I won't drill into it too much, but I just want to show you how diverse the Tampa economy is. There's no one sector dominating at all. The biggest one would be 18% for professional and business services, followed by 15% for education and health, thanks to the great hospitals and great universities that are here. Your kind of leisure and hospitality, which kind of be your tourism, 11%. Retail 13%, government 12%. So no one industry dominating at all. A really good diverse economy, which is one of the things I've always looked for throughout my career when I'm investing is diversity and population growth. So kind of drilling down a little bit more into Florida real estate. Cash buyers are about a quarter of total sales, which I think is a pretty healthy amount. And it's been like that for 5 or 6 years now. So 3/4 would be finance buyers, whether that's conventional finance or FHA loans or VA loans. Inventory has been very low, throughout Florida for 5 or 6 years. I know some people are always, think that inventory is low for us, for the properties I'm selling as well. And that has been true until recently, where we've expanded our inventory quite a lot in the last kind of 3-4 months. And we have, loads of great properties to sell now. But overall, the market is still extremely tight, 3.6 months supply. So very much a seller's market still, just because of the natural demand and because people aren't building enough properties just for the people that want them. And certainly the cost of building new houses, most of them are in the high 2s and 300s and 400s. You're not building properties for the prices we're selling our properties at all. So, very normal kind of traditional market. Majority of transactions in the market are just from one owner occupier to another. In the early days of our property rehabs, almost half the market, 40% of the market back in 2011 and 12 would have been distressed transactions. So, foreclosures, short sales, REOs, and now they're 6% of total transactions. So far less than normal. It's the market has reverted to kind of a pre-crisis kind of market all over again.
What was the percentage that you said it was during the crisis?
It was 40% in 2012,
Wow.
so 40% of transactions would have been foreclosures, REOs, short sales, and it was 6% last year. It's probably 5 or 4.5% now, Ben.
That's huge. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And this next slide it's got some kind of macro ideas or big picture ideas that I'm going to drill into a little bit, and I'm going to expand on it in more detail in the shows next week. But I spend a lot of my time both in the weeds, looking at houses, looking at the numbers, what it needs for renovations, what it's worth once it's renovated, etc. But I find it very important to take a step back as well, educate myself, speak to people that are more experienced than I am, learn about market trends, speak to people that are in other areas that might be one step further removed from Florida in a market cycle. So, I think Tampa's got one of the strongest real estate profiles in decades. Some people might think that they're 4 or 5 years too late to the party. I think that couldn't be further from the truth, and I'll kind of tell you why. And first of all, the last we've had a swing from the early 2000s where anybody with a pulse could get a loan for any type of house they wanted, to post-crisis where you literally need a steady job and a credit score in the 700s and fill out huge reams of background paperwork just to qualify for a loan. So if you're lucky enough to tick those boxes, you can get good loans for your primary residence and great loans for your rental properties as well. But if you're outside that club, which is huge swaths of the population, most of whom are regular, hardworking people, then you're kind of shut out of the market for buying houses with loans. And that naturally means you're going to revert to renting a property, because if you can't borrow 100,000 or 200,000 to buy a property, you're going to just rent a property. So that's pushing rental demand forward as well. You also have demographic trends where younger people, millennial generations, are postponing buying a house until they're much older. They like to maintain their flexibility so you can move around depending on where the jobs are being created. You also have older folks who have sold their houses and have decided to rent as well, because they don't want the headaches of dealing with roofs and water heaters and air conditioners. We've seen a lot of that in Florida. You also have low inventory here, which I just touched on. So these three factors are all huge benefits to anybody that wants to build rental portfolios, and they don't exist in every market cycle at all. They do now. Another reason is that the specific area where I operate, which is about 30 to 40 minutes north of downtown Tampa, is extremely stable thanks to a foundation of cash buyers and non-finance owner-occupiers. And what I mean by that is that a huge amounts of the owners of the properties in these areas don't have any mortgage debt. So that naturally makes them much more resilient to any turbulence we're going to see in the near future. If you don't have debt on your property, you don't really care about interest rates or bond prices or stock market crashes. You're kind of stable, and that stability is very important. You want to own your portfolios in places that are resilient, that are stable whenever the market does correct a little bit, as it inevitably will in lots of different places during the next 5 or 6 years. So where I'm operating in is very, very stable. And also, banks have literally just started lending in volume to first-time buyers in the areas where we're selling our properties to real wealth investors. 5 or 6 years ago, most of the prices were under $100,000. Banks weren't queuing up to originate loans of under $100,000. It was a lot of hassle and expense for them when it was the same amount of work to originate $200,000 loans. So they weren't really doing it, and it was hard to qualify them anyway. But now the prices have crept into the 120s and the 130s and the 140s. There's lots of people. There's a whole new wave of people coming into these areas, literally for the first time, to get owner-occupier mortgages. So that's providing an additional acceleration in property prices, and it's going to be a wave that continues, I think, for several years to come. So really, despite having strong growth, and Florida is definitely a growth market, property prices have been increasing very healthily for 7, 8 years now. I don't think they're going to be slowing down. Tampa's at a different point in the recovery curve to most other major markets, and it's still affordable, and there's lots of room for price increases. So I just wanted to kind of leave you with that kind of big picture stuff before I drill into the specific properties and the specific property types that we buy week in, week out. Okay, so moving on to the next slide, there's a property we sold recently on Raintree. The majority of our homes are single families. They're concrete built, they're single story, they've got an attached garage, a fenced yard, a back porch, and open plan living areas. The sizes vary quite a bit, 900 square feet up to 1,1600 square feet. I don't get, 6 or 7 years ago, I was more focused on it has to be a 3-bed, it has to be 12 to 1,400 square feet. But the truth is, if you do your research properly and you get your numbers right, there's demand for everything. There's demand for 900 square foot 2-1s. There's demand for 1,500 square foot 3-2s. I mean, the numbers will tell you the story. So our price ranges vary from $100,000 to $160,000. Rent ranges generally $1,000 to $1,400. The rent to price ratios for people that like that, it's about 0.8%, 0.85%, which I think is extremely good for such a growth market, because you're generally making far more in capital appreciation than you are in annual cash flow, but the cash flow is still extremely solid in Tampa. So moving on to the types of properties we buy, these are all safe, low crime, almost boring kind of suburban areas, middle class areas, lower middle class areas with 60 to 70% owner occupiers. And that's a very important factor for me. I don't like buying properties in areas which are dominated by renters, where everything is a renter, where every owner is an investor or a landlord or a big fund. I prefer having exit strategies where I can sell it to an investor, or I can sell it to an owner occupier. I mean, having areas dominated by regular owners provides additional stability, and they look nicer, to be perfectly honest as well. I mean, you try and keep up with the average of your streets. So we don't buy in any waterfront areas. We're not buying on the coast at all. We're not near any beaches. We're not in any low-lying areas. We're in elevated inland areas, 6, 7, 8 miles in from the coast, in these concrete block suburban areas that are outside the floodplains. Okay, so we buy them in lots of different places. We buy a lot at the auctions, both the public foreclosure auctions and private auctions like Hubzu or Zome or auction.com. We buy a lot from wholesalers. We buy a lot of properties on the MLS as well, you know, generally REOs or kind of properties that are extremely kind of run down or extremely dated. And what we do is we take these fundamentally very secure structures, you know, slab foundations, concrete structures, and we modernize them. We update them with new roofs, new HVACs, new kitchens, floors, paint, fences, doors, fans, smoke alarms, you name it. They look as good as new. So we try and standardize our templates as much as possible. So same kind of paint color, same countertops, same cabinets, same bathrooms, because that enables us just to get more efficient, to get better pricing, and just better volumes and better velocity. So it's really a win-win, and that these houses are all, you know, fundamentally very similar, all built in the same kind of periods, and we try and renovate them to the same kinds of standards so that we know exactly what they're worth, what they're going to rent for, and investors, you know, seem to like it a lot. So we kind of focus, I'd include, you know, I'd call our areas A and B areas. We stay away from the C and D areas, the lower income areas, the, you know, the rental dominated ones, the Section 8 areas. We don't really do any of those. We're in much more kind of stable, you know, B areas, B minus areas for the most part, and anywhere with rents of, you know, kind of above $1,000 a month in an area where there's lots of owner occupiers is a kind of B area in the north of Tampa. Again, it's a much more affordable market than some of the markets where our listeners are located in. You know, $50,000 a year is considered a good salary. You know, here you can have a good lifestyle here for $55,000. So tenants are often, you know, full-time workers that work with the local government, that work in schools, in hospitals. Lots of retirees on fixed pensions from the Northeast. You know, got plenty of like police officers, firefighters, these kinds of people. Great tenants that tend to stay for years. Obviously, property management is crucial. I'll talk about that in the next slide. But our, you know, the vetting is extremely rigorous. And what I say is we're not experts on everything, but we are experts on a pretty specific market within Tampa. This kind of, you know, 4 miles wide by 8 miles long. We've probably bought and renovated and sold more properties in those subdivisions than anybody else in the last kind of 5-6 years. So we know them extremely well. We're certainly not, you know, dominating them by sales volumes, because no investor does, because the majority of people are just owner occupiers or mom and pop investors. But we do know it extremely well. We do underwrite properties very, very quickly and renovate them very quickly. So, you know, that knowledge obviously gets passed on to the people that we sell them to as well. So property management, you know, my firm doesn't do property management in-house. We focus our energies on buying, renovating, and selling properties, but we do have our own rental portfolios in these areas. We do have our own very well vetted property managers that Real Wealth have also vetted, that do a great job, that provide an investor-friendly service. And, you know, we have our kind of go-to people that we're happy to introduce buyers to and manage probably over 100 Real Wealth properties at this stage. So, you know, 250, 280 properties in Tampa, most of them focused on the areas that we operate in. They have a fixed 8% management fee for Real Wealth Network members. They take 3 to 4 weeks to place a tenant, and that's on purpose, because you could place a tenant in 1 or 2 days if you wanted to, and I'm sure a few people listening in have done that in the past and lived to regret it afterwards, because they jumped in too soon and accepted the first person waiving a deposit in front of them. So the vetting is extremely rigorous. Because we renovate houses to, you know, higher than average standard, we get tenants to higher than average standard, or we can hold out for the best tenants. And you know, credit checks, background checks, rental history checks, obviously criminal checks as well, income verification. It's all extremely rigorous, and most applicants are just turned down, and the ones that are accepted tend to be really high quality tenants. So I'm going to go through a few photos which show our renovation standards. Obviously, they speak for themselves. We do Every property we renovate gets photographed by a professional photographer afterwards. So you have those high-res versions for your own records, and we also will send them to whatever property manager you choose to work with. So we do absolutely get the best out of our properties, both with our renovation standards and the photos we take of them afterwards. So they show extremely well, they advertise extremely well. We do deliver a high quality product, but it's a tenant friendly product as well. It lasts long. We're not putting on bells and whistles that break the first time an 8-year-old kid uses them. So we do it right, and we've done a lot of tried and tested materials over the years, and we have great partners that we work with for for flooring, for roofs, for HVACs, for painting, for everything really. Okay, so let me quickly go through 3 properties which we'll be bringing to the show next weekend, plus other ones. Don't let this picture is a pre-renovation picture, so don't let the kind of scruffy exterior put you out at all. So this is a 3-bed, 2-bath, 1,184 square feet property. Sales price is 129,900. 20% down payment plus your closing costs. So a finance buyer would be all in for about 28,500 for this one. Your monthly mortgage payments at 5.25% will be 574 a month. Your taxes, and again, the taxes in our price ranges are generally 1,200 to 1,500 a year, kind of depending on the square footage. So 113 a month for property taxes, 75 a month for insurance, 8% management. So total monthly costs are about $850. Your monthly income, $1,100. So that's a nice round $250 a month cash flow, or $3,000 a year. And to be honest, those numbers are pretty consistent whether the price is 130,000 or 140 or 150,000. You're going to earn roughly $3,000 a year, with these kinds of overheads with an 80% mortgage. Obviously, if you're buying with cash, and a lot of people do that, especially kind of people that are doing 1031 exchanges, your closing costs are going to be quite a bit lower because you're not paying lender's title insurance, you're not paying origination fees and other bank fees. So, you're all in for about 131,100. Your overheads are all the same except for having 0 mortgage payments. So, $276 a month in cost with $1,100 in income. So monthly cash flow, $824, and just under $10,000 a year. Okay, so pretty nice numbers, I think, for such a stable high growth market.
Mm-hmm.
And this next property, you should have seen how this house looked, Ben, when I bought it about a month ago. I mean, it doesn't even look like the same property now, but this is a photo I took last Friday when I was there. There's nice blue skies, and this is a similar 3-2. It's a little bit bigger than the last one, so 1,350 square feet, which is, most of the reason why this price is 143,900, but you'll get extra rental income as well. So, again, these are your 20% down payment, your closing costs. You should be all in for under $32,000. Your monthly mortgage is going to be $636. And once you cover your taxes, insurance, management, your monthly cost should be well under $1,000 a month, and your income, comfortably $1,175. So again, monthly cash flow $249, annual cash flow, $2,988, and the same numbers for a cash buyer. You're going to have total monthly costs of about $290. 1,175 income, so monthly cash flow of 885 or 10,620 per year. And the third property, and we're kind of wrapping up after this, I think. So third property, this one, Mayfield, which we bought a couple of weeks ago, and we're almost finished renovating it now. Very similar to the last one, 3-2 with a garage, 1,344 square feet. This is on a nice corner lot as well. So the price, 144,900. And once you get your down payment, your closing cost, you're all in for under $32,000. Your mortgage payment is going to be $640, taxes $121 a month. So total monthly cost for this one estimated at $932. You'll rent this one for about $1,200. So again, monthly cash flow $268, annual $3216, and with cash, same kinds of numbers. You're not going to have a mortgage payment, obviously, so your total overheads are going to be about $292 and $908 per month cash flow, or $10,896 per year. So these are the kinds of properties that we sell week in, week out. We're going to be bringing a lot of them to the shows next week. We bought another one very like this one just earlier on this morning at the auction. So this is what we do. We're happy to talk to people about them, and Ben's very familiar with it as well. So I'll kind of leave it there, Ben. I'm sure you've got some questions, or your listeners have some questions. I'm happy to
Yeah,
take.
yeah, absolutely. And I neglected at the beginning of the webinar to point out that anybody watching this live, um, please type some questions in the little GoToWebinar control panel over on the right. And we've got a few questions already, but if you want something answered, go ahead and type it in and we will talk about it. Would you mind go back just one last slide, just so that we can kind of, sometimes people like to stare at the numbers a little bit,
Sure.
and just for backdrop. I mean, all three of the properties that you just walked through were a little bit different in price, but they're all 3.2s, block construction.
Yep.
Do you ever see, I mean, I remember when we did a tour about, gosh, a year and a half ago or so, they were all pretty much in that price range and that line, but there was one house in particular that was a little bit outside of your normal. It was a little bit more expensive, a little bit bigger. So occasionally you do find stuff that's either more expensive and higher up, or if somebody wants something, say somebody really was interested in stuff in the 90 to 110 price range. Is that something that you ever do see, or not?
Yeah, we do. I mean, most of our properties are 120 to 150, but we do get ones that are more expensive. We had a nice like 1,700 square foot 3.2 with a 2-car garage in, close to downtown Newport Richey. So that was like $167,000. We've had some smaller 2.1s, kind of 900 square foot 2.1s, which might be $90,000, $95,000. So absolutely, we do get them, and if people have a preference because they prefer to use their loans for more expensive properties, or they prefer to, pay smaller deposits, we get a bit of everything. I mean, like I say, maybe 80% are in the 120 to 150 range, but the other 20% might be a lot lower or a lot higher.
Perfect. Yeah, it's just one of those things also that, and Tampa's no different, but essentially you can continue to go up in price, but what happens is there's a little bit of what I like to call the law of diminishing returns. I mean, the sweet spot seems to be around 100 to 150. That varies by market, but once you go above that, rents don't generally keep up with the price of the home. So you can buy a house for 200,000, but it's not going to rent for all that much more than the place you paid 143.9 for. I mean, they'll rent for a little more, but it won't really make up for the additional amount of money that you're paying for the house.
It won't. I mean, it might appreciate a little bit more, depends on where it is, depending on how many owner occupiers are in that area and how many comps there are with that specific kind of price range and square footage. But in terms of just pure cash flow, then no, a $200,000 house doesn't rent for twice as much as a $100,000 house, but obviously the taxes are twice as much and so on. So you're right. We've always kind of tried to go for the sweet spot where you're buying in areas which are safe, and tenants are a good quality and stable, and you're getting a good quality structure and renovation. And for us, that's in the kind of $130,000, $140,000 range. If you go too much higher, you've got that law of diminishing returns, and if you go too much lower, you're either buying in properties that are in, areas that are not as good, or there's deferred maintenance. A lot of people sell stuff that looks good, but you find out that the roof is, near the end of its life, or the AC's, 20 years old. So yeah, there's always something. You generally get what you pay for,
Yep, exactly. And then those really low end properties sometimes look really good on paper, but what the paper doesn't show you is the higher rate of turnover. We're talking like the D and F areas, or even some C minus areas, higher rate of turnover, lower caliber of tenant overall, fears of vandalism and problems the instant the property goes vacant because they're in pretty bad areas. So they look great on paper. Oh my God, I'm getting a 28% rate of return. Yeah, if everything goes well, and everything most likely will not.
No, certainly not over a period of years. You might get away with it the first year, but it'll catch up with you.
Right. Absolutely. Okay, we've got a couple questions on why is there no vacancy and maintenance. And I don't know if you can see this from at home, but you notice how in the lower left corner of the slide, it says here, it is the responsibility of a prospective buyer to confirm the accuracy of any pro forma. But then the last line, it is also recommended that buyers set aside reserves for potential vacancies and or maintenance costs, typically calculated between 3 to 6% of rents. So we used to a while ago, we used to always put on our performance 5% for maintenance, 5% for vacancy.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is it's such a subjective number, and it all just depends on where on the scale, how conservative of an investor you are. So we just decided as a company to stop putting those on there and instead just make it very clear to people, which is what I'm trying to do now. Just add your own vacancy and maintenance percentage based on either your level of conservatism, your level of paranoia, or your just prior experience. And so that's why those numbers aren't there. So if you want to add, say take an additional 10%. So for example, on the property you're looking at now, 10% of rent here, the total rent coming in is $11.75. So you take an additional $117.50. So you would subtract it off the 249. So 249
Sure.
minus 117 equals 132. So yes, it's going to negatively affect your cash flow, but there it is. If it's still a healthy $132 a month.
Yep, no, I'd agree with that. And sometimes you need to do it property by property as well, depending on where you're buying and what kind of house you're buying. Like this house that we're looking at now had like a $35,000 renovation. I mean, basically everything was new: the roof, the AC, the garage door, all the floors, the kitchens, both bathrooms, fences, everything was kind of new. Whereas other houses either in our markets or other markets, the roof might be halfway through its life, or the AC might be a third of the way through its life, or the kitchen might be 6 years old. So you kind of have to incorporate what house you're getting as well when you're calculating your own maintenance reserves. Or you might just do I know people that just do 1% of the purchase price and just do that as a reserve and just set that aside in their bank account. But it's up to, there's lots of information out there as to what's the best thing to do, and networking with other investors at the events is a good way of gathering information on it too.
I mean, I've always just kind of used the term, if you only have one property, have three, maybe $3,500 sitting in the account that you use as a reserve. And if you have 2, 3, 4, the more properties you have, the less your reserve amount has to be per property. But, don't cut it close to the bone. I mean, have some available funds just to cover the insurance deductible and the occasional, because things do happen no matter how well you renovate. And you renovate very well. And I know that from experience and just from working with you for 2.5, 3 years. But still, things are going to happen. You're buying a house that was built in 1978 or whatever. And no matter how well you renovate, things will happen. It may not be for 3 years, it may not be for 5 years, but you have to account for that. This is not a mutual fund that there's never going to be any maintenance for. But the goal is, when you look over time, you've got positive cash flow coming in. Most people use the positive cash flow to pay the 80% loan that they have, and it might take 12, 14 years to pay that loan off. But then you own a little box somewhere out in the heartland, and it's like a little cash machine. And if you have 10 of those, we're talking real money once there's no more loan. I mean, it's if you have an average property giving 700, maybe it's rented for 1,000. There's no more loan on it. You've got $250 of taxes, insurance, property management. Well, about $750 left over. You have 10 of those. That's $7,500 a month times 12 months is $90,000 a year.
Life changing, financial freedom. You can make a lot of decisions in your life if you're getting $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 in passive income, and it's achievable for anybody, regardless of whether you're 30 or 40 or 50 years old.
Absolutely. Okay, let's see. We got a lot of questions here. Let's see. Which one should I do? How about? Okay, I'm gonna just give your vocal cords a little break here and just answer some of these. But the question is, do you have lenders in place? And yes, the way Real Wealth Network works, I mean, you can use whatever lender you want. However, most of our affiliates, like Tampa and all the others, have people that they prefer to work with. Some of the big banks are just extremely laborious, slow, and unresponsive. And it might take, big bank 60, 70, 90 days to close a loan. So I know that Tampa has a couple lenders that they prefer to work with. So we recommend, and so do they, that you get pre-approved with a lender that they like to use. And the way to find that is log into Real Wealth Network. From the home screen, right up at the top, it says resources. Click on resources and then go to lenders. And there's about 5 lenders listed there. Or if you know you're specifically interested in Tampa, just go to the Tampa page on our site, scroll down, and it lists, I believe, Highlands Residential Mortgage and Chemical Bank are both prominently displayed there.
Yeah.
Those are the two that you guys like to use. So it's best if you do it that way. Okay, let's see here. Do you ever see any multi-units?
We do, and I like them, and I know you like them as well. But they're hard sometimes to get because we have the same renovation standards whether we're buying a single family or a multifamily. So I might bid on this great duplex or a triplex, and my renovation budget is, you know, $25,000 or $30,000 for all the units to update kitchens and bathrooms and ACs. Whereas I'm competing against local landlords who are doing none of that. They have a totally different business model, which is to clean it, scrub it up a bit, and put in a tenant paying $800, where I'd prefer to put in a tenant paying $1,000. So they're making offers that are lower than my offers, and it's, you know, for that reason we miss out on a lot of multifamily opportunities, because if you're a local landlord and you're kind of managing them yourselves and you're just kind of trying to squeeze every drop out of it before it's like falling down with deferred maintenance, and then you just try and sell it to some sucker. That's like a viable business model for a lot of people here in Tampa, but it's obviously not my model, and I have no interest in pursuing that kind of strategy, certainly for out-of-state passive investors. So if I can get a multifamily and renovate it and deliver it to, you know, in rent-ready condition to an out-of-state investor and make a little bit of money myself, I'll do it all day long. I'll bid on them all day long, but they're harder to get because of the kinds of people that I'm competing against. I mean, for this stuff, this house, I'm competing against owner-occupiers, so I can afford to swoop in with a cash offer, 0 inspection. I'll close it next week. I'll take on all the liens. I'll take on all the deferred maintenance, and I'll fix it up. And a lot of people will sell them to me like that, and that, you know, owner occupiers can't compete with my offers, even if they're a little bit willing to pay a little bit more than me. So it's easier for me to buy lots of single families than lots of multifamilies, but we do get them, and whenever we do get them, there's loads of demand for them.
Right. Absolutely. Okay. Yeah, a lot of questions on that. And then in terms of what actual towns, I mean, I know that we say Tampa, and you occasionally get homes in Tampa, you occasionally get homes in St. Pete, but the bulk of what you get are up in about, 45 minutes north of the center of the metropolitan area, up in towns like Holiday, Newport Richey, and Port Richey. Correct?
Yes, if you Google Pasco County, Pasco, a lot of our homes are in West Pasco, and like you say, the towns within that are Holiday, Newport Richey, Port Richey, Hudson to a lesser extent. But that West Pasco area, really within a box, if you look at where the 19 highway is on the west and Little Road on the east, we buy in that kind of window there.
Got it. All righty. All right, so we've got a couple questions on property management. Again, I'll just kind of address, and then you add color commentary.
Sure.
You had mentioned that it's not in-house. You use a separate company, and I actually have 2 properties that I have this outside property management company manage, and they've been very responsive. I mean, I would say so if they weren't, because God knows I've had some bad property managers over my real estate history, but this is not one of them. So an outside company, Real Wealth Network vetted them, checked them out, just like we did with you guys, and they're good. They're very responsive, and you've been having good luck with them, correct?
Yeah, I mean, look, if you're looking for the perfect property manager that never gives you any bills and maintains 100% occupancy, you're not going to get it, you know. So they're good. They're investor friendly, and I've like you, I've kissed my fair share of property management frogs over the years, and it's a tough business. It's not easy keeping investors happy and tenants happy, but look, we're doing them a favor by delivering very cleanly renovated properties in the first place. It makes it easier for them to manage and easier for them to attract the kinds of tenants that will take care of them anyway.
Yep. I mean, there's always going to be something. There's going to be things that happen, but
Yep.
I mean, the fees essentially are 8% every month.
Mhm.
Is it 100% or 75% of the first month's rent to find, screen, and place a tenant?
Yeah, 75% for the tenant placement, and then for
Mhm.
lease renewal, I believe it's 25%.
Right. Okay. Perfect. All right. So we've answered that. Let's see. We answered that. We've got a lot of questions on that.
Hmm.
Okay. Insurance question. The questioner says, sorry if this was already covered, but is hurricane insurance covered in standard estimate insurance? Is it mandatory? So I'll just, once again, since you've been doing most of the talking,
Uh-huh.
standard hazard insurance policy in Florida does include hurricane insurance. There may be a separate deductible. You may have a $2,500 deductible for anything else, but maybe a 3% of coverage deductible for insurance. I mean, for hurricanes, but it's still covered. What is not covered is flood insurance. Flood insurance is very expensive depending on where you're located and is extra, but is only required in some of the more extreme flood zones, which you don't buy homes in those flood zones. And to answer the question, yes, the rates covered, like on the screen we're looking at here, insurance, $75 a month, that would cover hurricanes. It just would be at a slightly higher deductible
Yeah,
usually.
and just as an added to the flood, I mean, you're right, we don't buy in low-lying areas. We certainly don't buy in coastal areas, and flood insurance isn't required in the types of areas where this house that you're looking at is. But if anybody just wanted to have flood insurance for peace of mind, even for the first year or the first 2 years, it's not that expensive to get flood insurance in an area that's not in the flood zone. It might cost you $500 a year. If you wanted it for peace of mind, you could do it. I mean, you don't necessarily need to do it. I certainly don't do it for any of my rentals, but if somebody just wanted to do it for whatever reason, it's about $500 a year. And obviously, if you were to get flood insurance in a coastal area or a low-lying area, it would cost you way more than that. But in the areas where I buy and renovate, the banks don't need it as extra security. And if you did want it, it's probably $45 a month.
Got it. Do you ever replace windows in the properties?
Only if they're broken, to be honest with you. I mean, there's a mixture. Some of the houses come with PVC windows that might be, 10 years old, and some of them come with older aluminum windows. I mean, we make sure they all work. We make sure they all have screens. We get them serviced if they need to be serviced so that they all open and close properly. And, that's generally enough. You don't need to go replacing windows, regardless of whether it's going to be a rental property or an owner-occupier property. You don't need to do it. And to be frank, you don't actually open your windows that often in Florida. It's too hot and humid for the most time.
Right.
But they work. We make sure all the windows work. They get serviced. If there's any broken glass or anything, any frames bust, they get replaced. But we don't, as a matter of course, replace windows because they have a naturally long lifespan, just as the electrics do, just as the plumbing does. If you're in
Right.
older houses that were built in the 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s, then windows are an issue and plumbing is an issue and electrics are an issue. But if you're in more modern houses, 70s, 80s, 90s, it's generally not one of the items. It's not, roofs and ACs and floors and kitchens are the big ticket items, not windows.
Yeah. No, absolutely. All righty. Now, in terms of landscaping, obviously the
Hmm.
tenant is responsible for lawn care. I mean, that's
Yep.
it's not like a
Yeah.
multi-unit situation where you might have to, you have 3 or 4 tenants. That you might have a landscaper for, but it's single family. Tenants responsible for their own landscaping.
Yeah, and they need to take care of it. They can't let it get overgrown. They can't park their cars in the lawns. I mean, when we deliver a property, we generally have some good curb appeal. We'll obviously make the lawns tidy. We add some red mulch to the front, maybe some hard-wearing plants, new fences. So we give it in good condition, but you're certainly not going to spend a fortune on landscaping, packages and plants and bushes and flowers for tenants, 90% of whom aren't, don't have those green fingers, don't want to take care
Right.
of it. So they're responsible for maintaining the lawns, cutting the grass basically, and keeping any, not piling junk up there, you can get fined for that, and the property managers do drive around regularly and give slaps on the wrist wherever is necessary. But for the vast majority of cases, tenants just take care of their grass, and it's not a big deal. It's not the owner's responsibility. It's not an expense for an owner.
Nope, absolutely. Now, here's another hurricane question. Big trees looming over property can be a concern. What do you normally do in that situation? Do you just trim them back a little bit, or?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of beautiful old oak trees around Tampa, and if they're big and beautiful, they've already survived, more storms than we have. But yes, there are things you can do. We absolutely do pay tens of thousands of dollars every year on tree surgeons to cut back branches that are hanging close to the roofs, because that you do need to do that. I mean, if we take weight off branches, we take weight off the secondary branches, we do cut branches. So if we do buy a house that has a kind of an overgrown tree, which is kind of looming over the house, we do trim it back. We're not ripping up kind of 90-year-old oak trees just in case, they get struck by lightning or something, because these are extremely strong trees, extremely strong root systems, and for the most part, if you keep the branches trimmed back, that's more than enough for anything that you're going to need to be concerned about.
Okay. Could you advance to the question slide? I'm sure everyone's sick of looking at this one house here.
Sure.
Oh, okay. Either one, that'd be good. Okay, how about sure, why not? That one with the red door, perfect. See, there's a couple large trees, and as long as they're not touching the roof or anywhere close to it, then it's fine. What is the average appreciation of these properties over the questioner is over the long period. Maybe you might not know that, but just over the last few years.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to speculate on what they're going to be in 5 years' time, but certainly in the last 5 years, you've been consistently seeing 7 to 10% annual appreciation across the Tampa Bay area, and especially in Pasco County. In some cases, it's been 10 or 11%. So it's been very strong, very, very strong, and it's not showing any signs of slowing down. And like I mentioned in one of the earlier slides, you're just getting a wave of first-time buyers getting finance in these areas now, which I think is going to drive prices further, because it is still very affordable. You're still getting a big house for $145,000. Most people are earning incomes that are where they can easily afford mortgages for these kinds of homes. So yeah.
And your partner, I was talking to him, your business partner, and he made a really interesting comment that is really obvious in retrospect, but I had never thought about it this way. And using a 7 to 10% appreciation figure, if you're buying houses around 100 to 120 to 140,000, using that rate, they're essentially appreciating about at the same amount as your rent. So you're renting. Your rent's coming in at $1,200 a month, and it's appreciating about $1,200 a month also. Now, of course, that's purely speculative. Nobody knows what will happen, but if we're using past performance as an indicator of the future, that's always something that I think people overlook.
Look, this number here, 10,896, income for a cash buyer, that's equivalent to 7.5% appreciation on $145,000. It's comfortable. It's been doing that for 6, 7, 8 years, and I think you can reasonably assume that you should get that, next year, for example. So absolutely, you might only be getting 3,200 a year, and in another market you might get 3,800 or 4,000 for the same price. But in Florida, you might be getting capital appreciation of 10 or 11,000 a year, and in another market it might be 2 or 3,000 a year. So you definitely need to think about both. I mean, you can't obviously you can't guarantee the 3,200, and you can't guarantee the 10,800 appreciation either, but you should consider them both. And if you're comparing a high growth market like Florida with other markets that might not be high growth, maybe in the Midwest, where they're getting really good cash flow but not the same appreciation, I mean, you need to kind of bear everything in mind. It's not just this cash flow versus this cash flow. Florida has a lot of extra benefits to offer with the capital growth.
A lot of times people have, and I'm guilty of this too, you have tunnel vision. You're looking at this pro forma like we're looking at here, and those are the numbers, and those are the ones that you can count on tomorrow, yes. But the more soft numbers, the appreciation numbers, I think, I'm just repeating what you say, but if you invest in the upper Midwest or whatever, you're going to have a slightly better cash flow, but you're not going to have much appreciation, if at all. It'll keep up with inflation, and that has to be considered as when you're looking at where to invest.
Yeah, I think so. And you also have that owner occupier exit strategy, which I think is worth a lot. Having that option that if you do need to sell, that there are owner occupiers that want to buy it, that you're not relying on hardcore investors, number crunchers that are just going to ruthlessly look at every nook and cranny and number of the property, that you can sell this to somebody that just likes the location, that likes the locality. So that's worth money as well.
Absolutely. All right, here's the final question we can do today. In fact, it's the final question that we had is, I know you vet your tenants very well, but what is your non-payment rate and eviction rate over a given year? And this may be a PM question, but I'm sure you can speculate a reasonably intelligent guess.
Evictions is very, very low. I mean, really the only evictions I've had to deal with are from tenants I've inherited. It's not really from tenants that have been placed. I mean, it does happen every now and again, but it's generally just because life happens, because somebody got divorced, or somebody died and they lost income. I mean, it's just life sometimes gets in the way, and you need to evict people, not because they're sneaky or bad, just because life gets in their way and they suddenly can't afford to pay the rent, and that's what happens. But it's very, very rare. I mean, probably 1 or 2%, but I'm guessing there. But I mean, we've done hundreds of properties, and I can only really remember 2 or 3 situations where tenants that have been placed in a renovated property have to be evicted. It's very rare for a professional manager placing a tenant in a renovated property to have to evict them, unless something dramatic happens, like job loss, divorce, things like that.
Understood. Okay, perfect. Well, that does it for the questions. If you could advance one more slide for me, and we'll kind of close this thing out. You are going to show up at San Francisco, in Northern California, and Los Angeles and San Diego in Southern California, not this weekend, but next weekend, the 20th, 21st, and 22nd. You've got the times and the locations right there. If you register at the URL you see, the website you see at the bottom, we'll give you information on what hotel it's at and all the details. You are going to be there. We're also going to have our Jacksonville team talking about what they've got going on, and we may have a couple other surprises in there. I'll be at the San Mateo event, and Aristotle will be at the Los Angeles and San Diego event, and also Joe Torre will be at the San Mateo event also. So hope to see you there. Okay, well, one last thing that I was going to say is, if you have not had a strategy session with us, then please go ahead and just book with us. If you don't know really what I'm talking about, the way Real Wealth Network does things is you essentially book a strategy session with either myself or with Aristotle or with Joe, and we talk to you about the various events. We talk to you about various markets, and we together help kind of come up with some ideas for you. And then we'll send you market context. So if you loved what you just heard from Tampa, then by all means, just go with Tampa and have a strategy session. If you've already had one of those, you have an IC, then fantastic. Then all you got to do is just email your IC. Hey, I really liked what I heard from Tampa. Could you please send me the contact information for Tampa? And we'll put you directly in touch, and away you go. And you can talk to your heart's content. All righty. So there it is. Go to realwealthnetwork.com/connect. And there's 888 number you can call. There's plenty of ways to get in touch with us. And we do this every Thursday at noon, and we're ending right on time. So, hey, thanks so much for talking about your market. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome, and look forward to seeing you next week.
Absolutely. See you next week. Thanks, everybody. We do this every week. Tune in anytime. This is Ben Smith, Director of Investor Relations with the Real Wealth Network. We'll see you next week. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.